For the next 10 hours, I'm gonna see how far I can climb with movement speed Warwick. So, why movement speed Warwick? Well, the faster that you run, the longer your ult range is, which can lead to some pretty funny misplays. I missed some more embarrassing misplays. What? And some super cool outplays. Because I'm coming up with this build from scratch, I experimented with a lot of different runes and items, and these are my favorite. For runes, I mostly went lethal tempo with a little bit of press the attack. I tried phase rush, by the way, for extra movement speed, but it was just unplayable. I did no damage. For the items, you can probably guess Deadman's and Force of Nature were two of my favorite items. Good tanky stats with solid movement speed abilities. Damage is where I was a little bit more confused. Kraken Slayer was the best by far, but I needed one more to start carrying, and for that it was either Phantom Dancer, Static Shiv, or Hullbreaker. And finally, for the situational items, Shurelia's Battlesong and Trailblazer were great to help my team run fast if I was falling behind. And as usual, because this is an off-meta build, I decided to play a few normal games just to make sure I wasn't trolling too hard. And I'll be honest, I really did not realize how strong Warwick was early game. I hadn't even really started my off-meta build yet. I was just running around smacking the shit out of people.
I'll take that kill, thank you very much.
For my first game, I started Tiamat because even though Warwick is very strong early game, his clear speed needs a bit of help. I also went Phase Rush because I wanted as much movement speed as I could possibly get for this build. The idea was Tiamat for the clear speed into Deadman's, Force of Nature, and Phantom Dancer for as much movement speed as possible. But you see, even though I got fed early, it turns out building 0 damage items is not very good. So I quickly changed my build path. Tiamat doesn't give movement speed, so I was gonna try to clear camps without it, and I needed more damage early, so I wanted to build Phantom Dancer sooner. I also changed my runes to lethal tempo because with a lot of attack speed from Phantom Dancer, it was really strong. But even though I was attacking a lot, doing about 10 damage per auto was just not enough for me.
We're not gonna talk about it.
I was still having a blast with my crazy ult range though.
Get his ass!
Anyway, it was back to the drawing board. What item gives me movement speed, attack speed, and pretty decent damage? Lucky for me, the answer was pretty obvious. Kraken Slayer. I mean, it was perfect. All of a sudden, I went from doing no damage to a lot of damage and still having the movement speed to chase people down. Even when I missed my ult, I had plenty of damage. And because of Warwick's E and insane healing, I was actually still super tanky. I was able to just take crazy fights and live. Usually. And after those 2 damage items, then I built tanky items like Deadman's and Force of Nature.
Wow. I lived? That's a movement speed diff, baby.
At this point, my main issue with Warwick was just his playstyle. I'm used to farming junglers, but I was not very good at gank first junglers. Warwick just really likes to fight early and often, which causes my CS to be a little bit lower, but as long as I was impacting the map, it was still turning out pretty well. And sure, I wasn't totally used to that playstyle yet, but let me tell you, having insane movement speed definitely makes it easier to just run around fighting everybody. So with the end of my experimental normal games, it was finally time for ranked. Starting from Gold 1, 17 LP. And just like in the normal games, I was surprised how strong Warwick was early. Without a terrible build to hold me back, my early game was pretty good. And even though my clear speed was terrible without Tiamat, the base damage from Kraken Slayer kind of made up for it, especially in the early fights.
Never mind, I take back everything I said about this champion. This champion is a fucking goat.
And with just Boots of Swiftness, Kraken Slayer, and Phantom Dancer, my ult range was getting pretty long. But it wasn't long enough. But even though I was doing well, the rest of my team was not.
Get her ass! You can't miss this!
You can't miss.
How? How?
And I lost over and over and over and over again. Listen, before you start blaming the build, I was actually the ace in every single one of these losses during this time. I mean, sure, this weird build definitely didn't help, especially when half of my deaths were just trying to get max range ults.
No, don't, no!
But I was actually playing really well and using my movement speed to make plays all over the map. I was also starting to get better at Warwick mechanically, using my Q to dodge CC like this Blitzcrank Q. And somehow, even though I was building movement speed Warwick, I still wasn't the most troll build on my team. Cough cough, AP Yumi. But you know what? I shouldn't judge somebody else's build. I'm literally building movement speed Warwick, and my summoner name is This Build Sucks. And despite some bad games and some interesting teammates, I was still having an absolute blast with this build, even if once again the game ended in disaster. And at this point I was starting to think, is it me? Am I the problem? Is movement speed Warwick not some secretly OP build? Or was it because I was just bad? Like here, I accidentally made Diana take turret aggro instead of just hitting Darius. Sorry, Diana. Whatever it was, something needed to change. I mean, I was 7-0 this game, and I was still not able to carry. And even though I was doing super well personally, I decided after this game, I needed to change my build and have a mental reset. And even though I was sad this particular build didn't work out, I knew it was for the best. We had some good times, pulled off some amazing fights, and even though I saw the potential, it just wasn't good enough. But yeah, at this point I had fallen almost 100 LP and was back in gold 2. So like I said, at the 5-hour mark I took a break and decided to cook up a new build, and here's what I came up with. First, I changed my rune to press the attack. Since this build doesn't do that much damage, I thought giving me some extra burst early would help the build out. Next, without Tiamat, Warwick's clear was just too slow. So since Stridebreaker gives movement speed with its ability, I decided to include it even if it doesn't give me passive movement speed. After Stridebreaker, I had two main build paths, a utility build if my team got fed, or a bruiser build if I got fed. And after I made these adjustments, things got a lot better. For the utility build, my next two items were Trailblazer and Shirelia's Battle Song. The idea was, if I wasn't fast enough, I would just help all my teammates go fast. I mean, Shirelia's gives my whole team 30% movement speed, and Trailblazer gives my team 15% of my movement speed, which, as you have already seen, is quite a lot of movement speed. And of course, with a lack of damage, I was mostly used to get picks for my team.
You're not safe, Bren!
I will admit though, if the enemy team has a lot of magic damage, I would build Force of Nature before Trailblazer. It just makes you so tanky against magic damage team comps. Now, for the games where I got ahead, I would go my Bruiser build after Stridebreaker. I decided my next item would be Hullbreaker because it gives 4% movement speed, which I didn't even know until making this video, and some pretty good stats. After that, I would go Deadman's Plate and Force of Nature for good defensive stats, kind of like before. And your last item was usually Kraken Slayer just for the extra damage.
Holy shit, we got both of them with the Tiamat!
At this point, I had finally come up with the perfect movement speed build. Now it was just a matter of playing more games. And to be honest, things continued to go well for me. Building Tiamat actually allowed me to farm my camps efficiently, and the movement speed allowed me to run all over the map, getting tons of kills for my team. But when I got 2 picks mid lane and my team didn't help me do the free Baron, I'll admit I got a little bit tilted.
I'm gonna just fucking do it. I don't know why we're not here.
Eventually my team helped me, but we took so long, we lost 2 towers and an inhib when we probably should have just lost 1 tower. Then I got 2 picks mid again, and I knew it was time for Dragon, while the rest of my team pushed mid. But then my Nico started killing Scuttle for some reason, and then the rest of my team immediately died. And once again, I lost even though I was the ace, and I'll admit, this one actually pissed me off. I had climbed a bit, but my rank should have been higher. Now, it was time for me to carry. Luckily for me, I killed the top laner once in the next game, then again, then he rage quit and we won in like 6 minutes. Anyway, after successfully carrying my first game, let me explain my final build. You see, even though Press the Attack was decent, I think Lethal Tempo was way stronger, especially because I was gonna start building more damage. And because I actually needed to do more damage, my second item was going to be Kraken Slayer. No more utility, no more tank, it was time for me to do damage. And do damage I did. With my new carry mindset and my more aggressive build, I was finally feeling like I was playing actual Warwick.
Boom, bitch, got him.
And instead of falling off super hard like my other builds, I was actually staying pretty relevant in the mid and late game. I mean, sure, Warwick's normal build is still better, but at least I was doing damage. And when I ulted people, I was also finally doing damage. Before, I was mostly just using it for the CC. Honestly, I really wish I had started with this build because it was actually going really well. A good mix of running super fast and, again, doing way more damage. And let me tell you, these final games were fucking incredible. Starting with this Shaco trying to invade me and dying, followed by a little later killing him again to finish off a sick triple kill, then Axe accidentally outplaying the Shaco, who probably thought I would blast cone over the wall with him, but instead he just flashed to his death. And to top it all off, I had this insane Baron steal from almost off the screen, which ultimately ended up winning us the game. So overall, how would I rate this build? I think the final version is somewhere around a 5 out of 10. Don't get me wrong, the ults are great and the build is okay, but normal Warwick is just so much better. At a certain point, having more movement speed doesn't really do anything, especially because your W already makes you super fast. But I mean, come on, what other build is able to run from bot lane all the way to Baron in 9 seconds, steal the Baron, and save an entire game? So yeah, I would probably rate this build like an 8 out of 10 in terms of fun. And hey, I did end up climbing even after that terrible start.